Robyn, since you sent over your initial like concepts and things, I've been stuck in a Hamilton like brain, so I've been listening a lot more to the soundtrack.
I know, I wish we could play the music right now.
Right.
Those little laws.
There is a really cool mixtape that they recorded live, I want to say in maybe even in DC. Um, but it's really cool to listen to as well. It's not the original cast, but it's also not like it's done a little differently.
We ready to start?
I think so. We've got our recording going and welcome everyone. We are going to be recording today to allow for others to watch this with us and go forward. I'm going to hand the reins over to Miss Robyn Schelp. She is our policy and advocacy director here at Kids Win and very knowledgeable lady. And then we've got some other guests that are going to be joining us as well. Take it away, Robyn.
Okay, so I am Robyn Schelp, and go ahead and in the chat put who you are, and I don't know, share just why you're interested in this call. Let us know what brought you here. Guessing we have varying experience levels from some of you who've maybe never advocated on legislative policy or at the Capitol to people who do this regularly. Just full disclosure, we're really targeting this presentation for those who are fairly new to this process. And I think the title's fun. In the room where it happens, we all, or a lot of us probably know the Hamilton song and that thought of, hey, I want to be where the real stuff is happening. And I like that title because the reality is the more I advocate, the more I realize that where it really happens isn't in one room in the Capitol around a table. Yes, it happens there, but man, it happens everywhere. The policy changes. All of this has to be part of it. It has to happen in the Capitol, in our communities, roundtable discussions, meeting with legislators. All of that is part of good policymaking. And so that's why it's so important to us to talk about how do we advocate? How do we get everybody involved so everyone's voices are heard and so that experts in their field, and that's you, have a chance to influence legislators that are making the choices who aren't experts in that field. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Before I go into that, I want to thank our sponsors. So Child Advocacy Day is really a big production. We have 6 workshops. We're doing community events throughout the state. And then in April, is it the 3rd? I want to say the 2nd, but it's the 2nd. It is the 2nd. April 2nd. It's a Wednesday. That's why I want to go with the 3rd. April 2nd, we're all going to meet at the Capitol, and there's going to be over 500 people who care about kids. They're passionate about children and want to advocate, and just a huge event. And it wouldn't be possible without our sponsors. And so I want to thank our sponsors, Children's Trust Fund, FACT, Missouri After School Network, and St. Louis County Children's Service Fund for their support, as well as many other gold and silver sponsors. One thing that's neat about our sponsors is many of them will have tables at the Capitol in the 3rd floor rotunda, and you can learn more about their programs when you're there in April. So today we're going to have a few things we're going to talk about. First, we're going to do, there's going to be a little talk about what is advocacy. So you know what we mean when we talk about advocacy. Sometimes advocacy, especially when we're talking about legislation, lobbying, that kind of thing, has a negative connotation. And we really want to change that. And what is advocacy? What does it look like? Talking about it at the federal level. This year more than ever, we were just talking about this before everyone got on. There's so much happening at the federal level and so much confusion. And it's important that we advocate at that level and share, hey, this isn't going to work for the people in your communities. So how do we do that? And then we're going to talk about Missouri legislature and advocating at the state level. A lot of people focus on federal stuff and what's going on and forget that many of the policies passed at the state level impact them as much, if not more, than at the federal level. So we need advocacy at the state level. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Lauren. And Lauren, I don't have a great bio for you. I'm going to let you do your own introduction. So I'm going to stop sharing and hand it over to you.
Yes, hello. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. I hope that you all had lovely weekends, that your morning beverage is still doing the trick, and your email inbox has some slight chill on it. May they have at least chilled out on the millions of sale emails and buy this, buy that, and you can actually get to the things that matter. My name is Lauren Relaford, and the MSW means that I am a social worker, but I'm a political social worker. And so I have a clinical level training and a community level training of what it takes to make sure that life thrives, not just survives, thrives. And I take that understanding and approach to a federal level. So that way, hopefully, we create policies that are actually informed by life and how people are experiencing different situations, not this really top down approach in which you have a bunch of people who may or may not have ever lived your experience. Me personally, growing up, I was on SNAP before it was called SNAP, when it was just straight food stamps and it was different colors. And nothing infuriates me more than to sit in a meeting with a bunch of folks talking about SNAP policy who have never used it, who have never been reliant on it. And so that is part of the reason why, one, your lived experience is incredibly important, because especially at the federal level, we are so disconnected from what's going on at that intricate community level that we can only do our jobs if we have folks telling us, no, this is exactly what the problem is, and this is how I'm experiencing it to better solve solutions. I do that as Director of Public Policy here at Children's Defense Fund. And I'm really lucky that I get to work with Jessica, and Jessica and Robyn have brought me into this space. And so what I want to do is just walk through you guys some slides to really just talk about sort of what power politics and policy means at the federal level. So if I can't see, I'm copying it. What I need to do is present. Can you guys see my slides okay? I can't see anyone on screen. So if
We can
anyone,
see everything great, Lauren.
Yes, yes, we
perfect.
can.
Awesome. So welcome to Power, Politics, and Policy at a federal level. Some of these things you'll be like, oh, I know this. This makes sense at the state level. And exactly. One thing before I even start is I really want folks to understand first the relationship between the state, local, and federal governments, because I think that that's going to really help contextualize a lot of this stuff. I think a lot of people think about the ways in which the government works together in a very, very like layered approach. So that way the federal government is at the top, then you have state government and local. It's very hierarchical. But when you actually look at it, the governments are really more of like a marble cake, right? Where each plays a part, and then where they intersect is where your voice is really important, because that's how, again, you get to shape and refine the ways in which that relationship works together. Again, this is me, Lauren Relaford, Director of Public Policy, and also want to just sort of table set this conversation. I have a liberator's heart. And so this picture means a lot to me. One, because I have been sort of inside the master's house in many ways. One, as a descendant of enslaved folks, but two, as someone who has frequently gone to the Hill and the White House. And so what I really want to do is help impart this wisdom and some of this experience that I have, so that way you guys get to that same space and we can all burn down these systems that keep our children in statuses of surviving and our families in constant stress, and create a world in which we all are equally accountable and prioritize the health and well-being of children. I'm also a big fan of just giving some definitions. And so when I talk about politics, what I really mean is the way that people live in groups and make planned decisions. So politics really isn't necessarily about parties. It really is more of a behavioral thing. It's the ways in which we understand each other, our relationships to self and others. And so when I'm, again, talking about it, don't think, oh, when she says politics, she's talking about a party. I'm actually talking about sort of the behaviors. Like, this is how we arrange ourselves. These are the customs. This is our structure. When I talk about policy, I want you guys to also consider policy as being a course of action for tackling a political problem. In and of itself, policy is a process. And so this is a process that we get to define. We get to integrate ourselves. We get to become part of throughout moments of time. And so in this context, again, federal making policy is very similar to state and local policies. But again, it refers not to just the end result of them, but the ways in which different groups attempt to get government policymakers to act in a particular way. I'm sharing all this to say that I think some of the times these terms can get really lost in the sauce and people feel like, oh, these are things that happen on Capitol Hill with certain folks. But I hope you guys are starting to see how advocates, how people with lived experience, people that are passionate, how you guys play a huge role in shaping politics and shaping policy, and most certainly influencing power. Power is really important at the federal level. And so for many obvious reasons, but there's different types of power. So the different types of power, when you get to, when you're thinking about federal spaces, is really good to think about the visible power. So a lot of folks, especially when you prepare for your meetings, only focus on the member. So like, okay, we're going into this member's office. We need to know everything about this member. That's important because, of course, at the end of the day, the member is the one that has the observable decision-making power. However, one trick, one tip, one like life hack that you should remember is there is a lot of hidden power. So these are the people that have the that are allowed to that set the political agenda, sometimes determine what decisions or what choices the visible power can make. And so when you're making your meetings, yes, prepare to have a meeting with a member of Congress, but also think about the staff. Think about the staff that they'll be meeting, who they are, why they may be interested in this particular issue, because what's going to happen is you're going to meet with a staffer and that staffer takes notes, and then they decide, really they're kind of making a pre-decision for the member. And so those hidden power folks, the staffers, whether they're on the Hill or in the district, quite frankly, sometimes even if you're having a meeting, being nice to the cleaning staff, like all of those people have a like immense influence on the visible power. So don't just focus on the member, focus on the people that help run the office too. And then invisible power. You as an advocate have a ton of invisible power because you shape the meaning of what is a problem, and then you also shape what is acceptable as a solution. It's also important to think about the other people that are setting the narrative, such as the media, and how you too can engage in your efforts. So as you're preparing for meetings, a good thing, or just even if you want to influence, think about how you can reach out to local and state media. This is especially important right now because folks, we are hearing from members of Congress that like, we don't even want to meet with you if you don't have someone from my district here, if my district hasn't spoken up about this. And so you as an advocate have an extraordinary amount of power when you exercise your voice at a national level, even by writing something in your local newspaper. Because what happens is federal advocates like me actually go through local news to find stories and connect with these folks and to elevate what is happening to the member of Congress and their office. And then if the member of Congress in office is like, okay, this is nice, this is a good read, whatever. And then what we do is we go and we invite you to the office, because it's like, if you don't want to listen to us, listen to the actual person. I'm sharing this theory of change because this one really explains why federal government is really slow. And why at a state and local level it works a lot faster. But this also explains why the relationship between advocates and policymakers is crucial. There's a theory of change that we call the policy windows theory that a lot of political scientists or politicos operate on. And essentially what we talk about is, in order for anything to get passed, three streams have to converge, and they create a window of opportunity that, at least in the federal level, is really narrow to go through. And in order for this to increase attention and to ensure that something moves at the federal level, two of these streams, really three, have to converge. And they are the problems, the policies, and the politics. We talked about the problems and the politics earlier. So again, when you're thinking about politics, what can I do as an advocate to get engaged in a political process, and not a party process, but in the actual political body? There's tons of ways. First, You can always write your member of Congress. You can always write your member of Congress. I will tell you that every time you email them and every time you send them a letter, they actually have a system that tracks all of their correspondence so that they can report out some of that data, but that is really crucial. You can also host press conferences or town halls, invite the member to you. These are things that you can even be doing at your state. Members of Congress are actually home right now for the next week. Go to their district office and just have a conversation with them and say, hey, like, this is what's going on. You probably may have heard, this is what the impact is. But that is really how you can get engaged in the small p political process as an advocate, whether or not you're on or off the Hill. Obviously, doing Hill visits while you're in DC, I highly recommend people go to district offices. I highly recommend you, regardless of how you feel about the individual, sign up for your member of Congress's like newsletter, go to their email, go to their webpage, sign up, see when they're going to be in a town hall, go to the town hall and ask questions, request for them to come to a town hall, right? There's tons of ways, again, to be engaged in the political process, regardless of whether or not you are on the Hill or off the Hill. Policy. This seems again like something that I don't know how I would get engaged in it, but sometimes the best ideas come from like the smallest little pebbles, which create big movements. For policy, you can actually write your own bill if you want. There are, of course, more formal ways to do this, but the best way for a grassroots advocate is actually just to try your hand at writing a piece of legislation. Think about something that's going on at your local level, an issue that you need changed, and write a piece of legislation. Shop it to your state legislator, shop it to your member of Congress, email it to them, to their staff. Invite yourself into the process, because we, again, at a federal level, a lot of folks are writing legislation for issues or life experiences that they've never gone through. And so you being engaged in this process is crucial, getting to know your member of Congress and their staff. So that way, as these bills come up, as these things are happening, they know, oh, wait, I have someone in my district that I should call who can kind of be a consultant. And then problems. This place is actually really crucial for advocates in the policymaking process, because again, we are working on assumptions of what the problem is, not a real understanding of how it is. And so as a grassroots advocate, you are actually the reason why I can do my job, because me going into a member of Congress office and saying, yes, this is a problem, that's fine. There's tons of other organizations that can cite the statistic, but you as an advocate, you can go in and say, I'm not living in a theoretical space of what poverty feels like, what going through the foster system looks like, what not having access to SNAP and WIC looks like. I'm going to tell you what this problem is. And the more and more you add that color commentary, the more and more you provide real stories and raise awareness through having rallies, through holding marches, through hosting demonstrations. If the member of Congress won't let you in their district office, stage a protest outside their district office and call the media. Like, bring attention to the problem so that way it's so like you cannot ignore it. That way the policy needs to be formed and the politics need to get in shape, and so the window is open. And advocacy. So what have I talked about? Essentially, I've talked about advocacy. I want to make it very clear that you don't need to be in DC all the time in order to be an advocate. Anytime you feel, whether from your own experience or from experiencing someone or watching someone else, anytime you speak up, wherever you are advocating. Because advocacy at the most bare bones is simply acting to secure the rights of an individual or group. When you talk about improving the foster care system, when you talk about criminal justice reform, you are advocating. And so just know, whatever the setting, if you were standing up and saying, this is what I believe about humanity, this is what I believe that we deserve as individuals, as a community, you are advocating for yourself. You are essentially saying, this, I understand that this is the situation, this is how the system is, but guess what? It's not working. It's not working for me. It's not working for my aunt. It's not working for my grandmother. It's not working for my family. It's not working for my neighbor. That is a very, very amazing, radical thing. And with the way that things are shaping up, being able to express that you are not liking what's happening is even more important, because it means that you are not just going to sit there and let anyone do whatever. Like, no, I am actually an active participant in my life. I am an active participant in the ways in which my communities are shaped and nourished. And you're just not going to do anything, right? If you do something, you will have to come through me, is essentially what advocacy is. Advocacy is also supporting and encouraging people we support to exercise their rights and personal preferences. And so a big part of advocacy is also just being mindful of the fact that someone may have a really compelling story, but they may not necessarily be in a space where they can share their story. Or sometimes it's just not safe for that person, right? If I, as a Black woman, were to go in certain spaces and try to advocate about certain issues, I would actually be in physical danger, right? Because again, I would be advocating to people who don't literally see me as a human, because I'm Black and I'm a woman and I'm a Black woman. And so it is really important. And I guess the word would be allyship, is to understand how power is playing out in different sections and understand the privilege that you may have. And this goes for all of us, right? Because I am privileged that I get to go up there and speak. But think about how the way that you're situated and the way that power is gives you an immense platform to speak up and speak out on behalf of other people. Again, that's advocacy. It's putting yourself on the line, knowing that you are going to be listened to more so than this other person. Even though you're going to be saying anything, you're going to be saying the same thing and showing up as an ally. And then the most important is that advocacy shifts power differentials. So we talked about the hidden power, the invisible power, and the visible power. It's shifting that power, shifting the resources, ensuring that things are equitable. Advocacy kind of is almost like an evaluation and monitoring and feedback piece, where you're saying, okay, this law has been passed, it's been implemented, XYZ. It's not actually working. We need to shift power. We need to shift resources. This needs to go there. Again, that's incredibly, incredibly, incredibly powerful. I'm just going to stop sharing. I have more slides because I could probably go on and on forever. And I want to be respectful and thoughtful of time. But I just want to also just give a few tricks and tips for folks. Again, I want to let folks know that you do not have to be on the Hill every day in order to be an advocate. You can easily, like I said, some steps, go to house.gov or senate.gov. Put in your zip code and you can find who your member of Congress is. Click, get on their newsletter. You may not necessarily agree with the member, but they are coming home. They're home right now, and then they're going to be home again for 2 weeks, starting April 14th to the 26th. Start thinking about how you can get them in their offices. Start thinking about how you can arrange a town hall with other advocates in your community or in your area and invite them and or their staff here. Write them, email them, call them. Their voicemail inboxes are a little overburdened, if you will, but keep calling. If you can't get them in their DC office, like I said, they have district offices. State senators, your senators have offices all throughout the state. Some district offices, depending on how big the district is, will have multiple offices. Normally, if you scroll down, it's at the bottom of the page. Invite them here. And guess what? If they don't come, if they ignore you, then the accountability structure comes in. That's when you call the media. That's when you start sending newsletters. And it's like, hey, we wanted to meet with this person to talk about this issue, but they didn't want to meet with us. Put the pressure on them and mostly share your stories. This comes from a general, but it's even more important now. One, and again, I'm saying this completely non-politically, but in the context of the executive orders, most of these cases that are being won are in part because hundreds, if not thousands of people are calling into their members of Congress and they're submitting stories as to this is how this is harming me. And these stories are then taken by the lawyers that are filing suit against the administration to demonstrate actual harm. So someone is like, oh, I just happened to email my story and it was, just a paragraph of how this is harming me. But all of a sudden, your story is going before a district circuit judge And they are making a decision for the rest of the country based on how it's harming you and others. So when I tell you the power of stories is real, and the fact that, again, members of Congress don't even really want to talk to us unless we have your constituents, this is the time to actualize that power. This is the time to really push on these folks. And don't assume just because you have a member that you agree with that they're always going to agree with you. It is always important for them to hear your voice. I feel like I have run over time, so I'm going to stop and be respectful. I do hope that this was somewhat helpful to folks. I am always here. I wish you guys all the best. May your pockets stay fat. May your belly stay full but flat. May your sleep be peaceful. And may every time you step into an office or write a letter, may it just be infused by so much power that the people that receive it can't do anything but help to act. Thank you guys so much and take care.
Thanks,
Thank you so much, Lauren. Does anyone have questions? A lot of information there. Okay, and if you do, we can always make sure to hook you up with email with Lauren and you can send those questions to her. So, my background is not in political advocacy. I'm a teacher by trade, and I say that because I really want to stress that anybody and everyone has the ability to do this work, which leads to we actually invited two people to come and talk about, hey, this is how I'm doing it. I didn't go into this as my trade, and I'm a childcare provider, and this is how I'm advocating. So one isn't able to make it. We'll talk about that in a second, but Nikki is going to talk about how she has been able to get involved with federal advocacy. So go ahead, Nikki. I'm going to share the screen.
Hi, like Robyn said, my name's Nikki Rexroth. I own 3 early care and education facilities in the Jefferson City area. So if you're familiar with that area, I'm in Jefferson City, New Bloomfield, and Holt Summit. I also serve as president-elect for Missouri AEYC, which is where my federal advocacy typically takes place. I've been really, really fortunate with Robyn and Megan and Jessica and the whole Kids Win team to do a lot of state advocacy as well. But Robyn's asked me to speak particularly on federal advocacy. Like Robyn said, this is definitely not something that I ever thought that I would be doing. I've been working in early childhood for 17 years in the state of Missouri. So I was a preschool teacher. I've been an assistant director, a director, and then I've owned my own facilities for 10 years this year. I got involved with advocacy when COVID came about because I had to, right? Those of you who worked or are still working in this and a lot of other industries, COVID shone a light on problems that we already knew existed, but it was time to, for me to really get involved. And so my big, I guess, the Super Bowl of federal advocacy for me is called Public Policy Forum with Missouri AEYC. It just ended at the end of February, and you can see some pictures here. You can see Megan and Jessica, who are on this call. They went to DC with us, and it was their first time going, and hopefully they got a lot out of it. It is something that's available every year to anyone. And we go and we have pre-planned and pre-scheduled meetings with different senators and Congress people to advocate for early childhood. So when I first started doing this, I was, thinking to myself, who am I? Why would Josh Hawley's office want to sit with me and hear what I have to say, right? Everyone in Josh Hawley's office probably has more education than me. They know about policy way more than I do. And one thing that I really learned is that they don't know more than I do, that really we are the experts in our field. They do, like Lauren mentioned, they do count on us to share our stories, to share information, to share data and statistics. So going in and knowing that you are the expert in that field can seem a little daunting, but it really is true. Some piece of advice that I have, definitely at a federal level, but even at a state level, is when you go in and you're advocating, you should have a specific ask. A lot of times you can end up in the weeds when you tell your story because there's so much to say, right? Working in this field, we all know that early care and education is infrastructure. So it touches every piece of the economy, every piece of the community, every piece of every family. But when you get in there at a federal level, they want to know what you want, right? What specifically can they do? Is there a bill you want them to vote a certain way on? Is there a specific issue that you are asking them to support or not support? They're looking, they are inundated with information 24/7. So they are looking for what your specific ask is and why should they care. And then having a unified voice as well. So you can see we had some kind of larger groups go in. And another thing that Lauren mentioned is who's the constituent, right? So if you're in a large group and there's someone in your group who lives in that district, they should lead that meeting because really they're the voter in that area. And that is what the senator or the congressperson wants to know. Who is their constituent? And what is your unified message? So coming in these pictures, the group that we went with, there were childcare providers, there were nonprofits, there were advocacy fellows, all the different groups of people. So we all have different experiences and different asks, but having that unified message with our ask is super important because you really only get 10 minutes maybe to give a full picture. At a state level, sometimes, we could pull people off the floor. We could spend a good 20, 30 minutes chatting. But my experience at a federal level is you've got a couple minutes and you need to be short, sweet, and succinct, but also still somehow put in the feeling of your story as well. So, yeah, and really Lauren touched on all the other great stuff that comes around. So mine is really much shorter than hers.
Thank you so much, Nikki, for sharing that. I just want to make sure people realize anyone can do this. Like, I can't say that enough. And everyone should do this. This isn't just for experts, for poli-sci majors. We need all the voices. So I thank you for sharing that. Does anyone have any questions for Nikki? Okay. Then, and if you do, feel free to put them in the chat too. I'm going to jump into Missouri. So we talked, Lauren talked a lot about at the federal level, and there's a lot of similarities. The nice thing about Missouri, the Missouri legislature and advocating at the state level is it's a little more convenient than at the federal level. Not all of us will get to travel to DC, but it's not so hard to maybe take a trip to Jeff City. Your legislators, you might have a state rep that lives in your neighborhood or in your city. So it's really nice. So we're going to talk about the legislature and what it's going to look like when you come in April to advocate a Child Advocacy Day, what those meetings look like. I know the first time I was told I have to have a meeting with a legislator, I was like, oh, I can't do that. That's so hard. So I want to make sure you know what it's like and you're not panicked. But a little about our legislature. So we have a part-time legislature. This means that they're only there at the Capitol from January to May. And they're actually only there they come about midday on Monday and leave midday on Thursday. So they are at home in their communities every Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They're there from June through December. They're very accessible, and that's really nice. They can be right there hearing your story, being part of the community. In September, though, they do return for a veto session. That's just a few days. And then at any point, the governor can call a special session, meaning when it's not legislative session, January through May, he might say, hey, you guys didn't touch on this specific issue. You need to come back and get this specific issue dealt with. And so he might do that. And then we also have term limits. In the House, a representative can serve 4 2-year terms. So every 2 years, you're voting for a state rep. And in the Senate, they can serve 2 4-year terms. So all total, if they run it right, there's the potential of serving for 16 years. And this is not a long time. And what does this mean? Some people are like, oh, term limits are great. We don't get stuck with someone who's bad in there forever. And that is true, but at the same time, we don't get stuck with someone good in there forever. We also lose what they call institutional knowledge. So we have legislators who don't know anything about Medicaid or child care or any of those issues. This year alone, in our House, let me tell you about our House and Senate. So our Senate is both of them. We have a supermajority that's Republican. And in the Senate, there are 34 senators, 24 Republican, 10 Democrats. And in the House, we have 163 representatives. There's a vacancy right now, though, 110 Republicans, 52 Democrats. Of those House members, over 50 of them are new this year. So you want to talk about coming in not knowing a lot. I mean, some of them don't even fully understand the process of a law bill becoming a law. I mean, they're very new, meaning they have to hear from you. They need to know, hey, what is going on with reimbursement rates or subsidy or whatever? They don't know, and that's your job to help educate them. So just putting this here, we could do, Lauren mentioned like, I could talk so much on this. I could talk so much on this, how a bill becomes law. We could do an entire hour-long presentation on how a bill becomes a law. And it actually isn't as boring as you might think it is. But I just wanted to throw this in here so you have access to this. And Jessica, if you remind me, I can send like a PDF of this so people can have access to a chart that tells you how a bill becomes a law. And this is really important when you're advocating to understand where a bill is. So I said that the legislative session is from January to May, meaning if May hits and they're done and that bill hasn't gone through the entire process and on the governor's desk, it's over, it's dead, and it has to start over in January. So it's really important to understand where that bill is in the process so you know how to advocate. So the first thing that happens is that bill is filed. Someone has an idea and they're like, hey, I'm going to file this bill based on this idea. And as Lauren mentioned, it might be you who has an idea and you might say, this isn't how it should be. Or, hey, this is what should be happening. And you might come up with language, or you might look at another state. You might say, hey, I really like how Kentucky pays all their childcare workers subsidy, even if they don't qualify, so that their kids can get subsidy coverage for childcare. I'd like that here. I'm going to take Kentucky's language, their law, and show it to a legislator here in Missouri and see if we could do that here. So that's another way. You can also just take an idea to a legislator and they can bring in their drafters and draft the language. There's lots of ways to get that bill filed. But then it goes through the process. House members, the representatives, file House bills, and Senate members obviously file Senate bills. And they go through. So first it's first and second read, then it goes to committee. First and second read is kind of a technicality. It's just a process. It gets basically they're submitting it in. But it goes to the committee. And this is really a great opportunity to advocate. The committee will have a hearing. And this is a chance for everyone who supports a bill and everyone who opposes a bill to come and speak as to why. You can also email the legislators who are on that committee. You can submit testimony in the House side. So this is a chance. If you're watching, if there's a bill that you're interested in and you watch it and you see that, hey, this is going to have a hearing, that's a great chance to submit testimony and to advocate. Then it goes, once it gets out of committee, it goes to the entire chamber, in this case, the House. And then everyone in the House has a chance to vote on it. Again, a great opportunity to email your legislators and let them know all about this bill. After they do all the amendments and they actually vote, kind of like they vote on it twice, they perfect it, and then they do a final vote when all the language is cleaned up. It's called a third read. Then it has to go all the way to the Senate and do the same process. So it goes to that committee, another chance to advocate, talk to the legislators, go to the hearings. Then it goes to the Senate floor. So there's so many opportunities to advocate as the bill goes through the process. That bill has to be passed with identical language in the House and the Senate before it can go to the governor to be signed into law. And I know this maybe doesn't sound too complicated, but this is a really complicated process. So much so that last year, of the over 1,000 some bills filed, only less than 30 became law. So it is really challenging. I could talk again a long time ago about it, but the best way to really dive into this, if you want to learn more, is to go to house.mo.gov. That's our House website, or senate.mo.gov, our Senate site, and just play around. Look at them. Look at who the senators are. Look at what, like, hit hearings and see how hearings are scheduled. Go to the legislation. Look at the bills that have been filed. I am going to show you a screenshot. It's a couple years old, but it still looks the same. This is, if you wanted to learn more about a bill filed in the Senate, this is what a Senate bill would look like. And you can go up here and look at the text and see when it has the committee votes and read a summary of it. There's so much information, and you can see where it is in the process. And then this is what a House bill, they look different, would look like. Again, it tells you the entire process, like where is it? This is the process through the legislative cycle. And you can see over here the text, the summary, people who testified on it. So there's a lot of information, and I would encourage you to go to our House and our Senate websites and just explore and play around. There are some really cool bills that you will like, and there are some that you're going to go, you have to be kidding. Nobody really thought this was a good idea. And see where those bills are. It's pretty interesting. This is just, I'm a big visual person. This is what our House of Representatives looks like. So when you come to the Capitol, this is on the 3rd floor, and you can go to the 4th floor and sit in the gallery and watch them debate bills. And this is what our Senate looks like. Same thing. It's on the 3rd floor, but you can go up to the 4th floor and watch from the gallery. Anybody can go and do that when they're in session. If you've never done it, I strongly encourage you to do that. The House is much more animated and exciting. The Senate is much more reserved and structured. A few more things, and we talked about this, but over 1,700 House bills and 800 Senate bills have been filed, and less than 30 became laws. Sometimes, a lot of times, they'll combine bills into one bill. So 30 bills may be a little deceiving, but nonetheless, it is a very complicated process, and it is so important that you are there advocating and pushing that bill along the way, because if you're not, it probably won't get passed into law. And it often takes years for an idea to become a law. That's how it's supposed to be too. Any questions about that process? I know I went quickly. Okay. So now we're going to talk about what it really looks like. So there are a lot of ways to advocate for an issue. And we really are encouraging you to take an opportunity to try all of these out. You can testify at a hearing. You can send an email, write a letter, go visit the legislators, which a lot of you will get to do in April, and then have town halls, invite them to your programs, to your facilities, and meet with them. Your legislators really do need to hear from you. Representative Hannah Kelly said that advocates give the best insight and advice to legislators because they have real experiences to share and learn from. The best legislators know that they don't know everything, and they take advice from the people that come to them. And many of them really do want to hear from you. And if your legislator, Representative Ashley Awney, she's the minority leader in the House, if your legislator won't meet with you, find another who will. You're not limited to just your state rep. You can talk to anybody. If you live in a larger city where there's multiple representatives, that's kind of nice because the lines get a little blurry as to who your rep is. So what do you say when you meet? Because that was my biggest fear when I was going to meet with the legislators. It's like, well, okay, I walk in a legislative office and then what? I mean, I can't even wrap my head around it. Has anybody, like in the chat, like with an emoji or something, let me know, have you ever gone and talked to a legislator? Like thumbs up, yes, I have, or I don't know. Terrified face, no, I haven't, but I'm scared. Or excited to do it? What are your thoughts about this? I will be honest, seeing thumbs up, that's great. Kristen, I think you are super excited to meet with your legislators. So with that one, someone said, yeah, it's odd. It is. It's kind of nerve-wracking and intimidating at first. I think the more you do it, the more comfortable you get. And most people who are going for the first time are really nervous. And by the time they're done at the end of the day, they're like, that was amazing, because like Lauren said, it gives you power. It's empowering to get to go and have those conversations and realize people are listening. So don't be intimidated. We want you to do this. Find people who have gone and do it with someone who's done it. But what do you say? We do have an entire workshop on crafting your story and how to share the story. So I'm not going to go into like what your story is, but I do want to go into in 5 minutes, what does it look like the meeting when you go in there? So you're going to have a brief summary. I like to sometimes write it down or encourage people write it down, like really get your thoughts tight, because one thing that is not in excess in that building is time. People don't have a lot of time. And it is not uncommon that you have 1 minute in the hall or truly a 30-second elevator ride to share what matters to you. So think about how to share your story tight. And again, we're going to talk about that at another workshop. And then, and practice it. I like to practice it over and over, because then I'm ready for it. When you meet them, be prepared, be direct, and stay on topic. It is amazing how legislators want to chase squirrels when you talk with them, and they'll like go off on this tangent, but it's your conversation. It's your meeting, and it's okay. So yeah, you're right about that. Now let's talk about childcare or healthcare or whatever your issue is. Bring it back on topic. It's good to like connect with them on something. Oh yeah, I used to work there too. Hey, let's talk about, like bring it back though to the topic, because again, you don't have a lot of time. And as mentioned by Nikki, know your ask. When you go in there, make sure you have an ask. Your ask might be to vote a certain way. It also might be, let's stay in touch. Come have coffee with me. Let's build a relationship, because that relationship is so important for future advocacy. Here are some pictures of meetings. I just really think it helps to see what it looks like. The offices are really interesting. They're all different sizes. You might meet in the hall, in an office. You just never know. What don't you do, though? You don't overload them with information. You don't argue with them. It is really hard to be in an office with someone who's point blank wrong about something. And unless you have to, sometimes there might be a point where it's like, yeah, but that you kind of have to just try to like focus on what you're talking about. Don't bluff or lie if you don't know the answer. That I love it when they ask me a question and I don't have an answer, because it's a great excuse to email back with them and continue that conversation. Because when we have conversations with people that are ongoing, we're building that relationship, and they're going to be more likely to listen to you and come to you for suggestions when you build that relationship. And don't disrespect their time. After you meet, so after Child Advocacy Day, it's so important that you send a follow-up email or thank you note. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me. And here's my personal email if you have any more questions related to, whatever that issue is. It's okay to send relevant information if it makes sense. Here's a really important article about what we were talking about. Don't overload them with that, though. And then invite them to future events. We like to invite legislators to tour childcare sites. Nikki, I know, invited a legislator to a ribbon cutting of a new facility. Invite them. Think about opportunities to engage them with them. Any questions about that? Man, I went fast so that we could have a discussion, guys. Okay, so unfortunately, Rachel was not able to join us. So those of you who have met with legislators, it's going to be your job to come off and share a little about the opportunity. Rachel, though, is from Rolla, and as most of us know, Rolla got hammered by the tornadoes, and so she's been dealing with that and the lack of internet. But I invited her to talk because she has done a lot of work in Jeff City. She's also done a lot of work in her community. So here are pictures from Jefferson City where she's gone and visited with legislators. This is what we're doing on April 2nd. But what's more important, and what I really wanted to share, was this next slide, and that is engaging at home. So there's a a saying that says people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And I think that's so true when we're trying to advocate. We have got to build connections with these legislators and make sure, you're just another person talking to them if it's just a one time that you ever see them. And yeah, they're going to listen and it matters, but how much more impactful is that if you're constantly communicating with them, if you're inviting them to coffee, if you've invited them. Rachel invited one legislator in the top corner. They were selling lemonade, so Representative Tara Peters came and sold lemonade with them to raise some money. Legislators want to be out in the community doing things, so this is a chance to, hey, invite them and have them come. And you can see some of the other pictures. They came in red. This is her with at the time Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft, but she was really good also about thanking them. As even if you don't like what a legislator does, and Lauren made a comment about it not being political, but we're focusing on policy. That's so true. You may not like the politics of your legislator. We are focused on the policies that we're dealing with, and we have to win them over on these policies. So try to put those differences aside and focus on the policy. And so it was just really great to see how she engaged with all these people. Someone said, is there a good way to introduce yourself, share what your agency does and why it's important, even if you don't have a bill? Absolutely. So I loved how Lauren brought up, get to know the staff. So when you go into the office, the first person you're going to meet is the legislative assistant or the LA. They're sitting at a desk right at the door. That's your first time to say, and it's great because you get to practice with someone who's not the legislator. Hi, I'm Robyn Schelp with Kids Win Missouri. And I want to talk about children issues or whatever the child issue is and talk about it. You might get to talk. That's the gatekeeper, and then they'll connect you with the legislator. And you could say, does Representative Peters have time for a meeting? And if they say, no, not right now. Okay, when is she available? Or can I talk to you then? Can I leave information? Because it is okay to leave information and talk to the LA. The LA then can elevate that issue to the legislator. So that's really important. And share your agency and why it's important. So one thing that people don't know that legislators do, they do more than just pass laws. And that is they are really great liaisons between our departments and their constituents. For example, I know a lot of people have had trouble getting their passports. If you call your legislator and let them know, I'm having a lot of trouble getting my passport, they can elevate that and help get that done quicker than if you didn't do that. Same as the driver's license. I'm really having this issue. They'll contact Department of Revenue and suddenly your issue is elevated to the top. I think some of our childcare providers realized that was subsidy. If they pulled in their legislators, suddenly they were getting some answers. People come to their legislators with problems. And so I like to make sure if I bring someone to the Capitol, I'm like, they need to hear what you do because they probably have a constituent that needs your service. And you're making that connection. So you might say, hi, I'm so-and-so. I work with disadvantaged children in this situation. If you ever have a constituent who needs help, give them my information. That is a huge way to connect with your legislator, and they want that information. So those are things that you can, that's essentially your ask. I want you to, my ask is that we stay connected, that you share my information, and that you use me as a resource. So that's also really important. It doesn't have to be that you have a specific bill that you're advocating for. It may just simply be, I really need you to make sure you're helping make sure children have access to healthcare or whatever. It could be high level. So I hope that answered that question. Any other thoughts? Any other questions? I'm gonna go ahead and stop my share. Anybody have a really great story from a meeting they did at the Capitol? Or else you're gonna have to listen to my stories.
Robyn, last year before I joined the Kids Win team, one of my favorite things happened as I got to sit down with a couple of different legislators and have really lengthy conversations, which doesn't happen very often. But part of that was because I went in as a gratitude piece. So we didn't have a lot of really hard asks. We just went in with a little leave behind that said, thank you. And thank you for all this work you've been doing. Was walking in and usually I was dropping it off and they would be like, well, come on in and let's have a conversation. 3 or 4 times we got to do that, and really have those great conversations with our legislators, letting them know, what we see that they're doing and the hard work that they're doing, because they are people and they are doing a lot of hard work on our behalf, and letting them know what's important to us. So don't be afraid to just have a conversation and tell them what's important for you. I love, Robyn, that you brought up, bring up those bullet points and kind of be prepared and be ready to go before you walk in the door. So
I would also just add another trick and tip, especially when you come on the Hill, is often members decorate their offices with things or products from their state. One of my most memorable was walking into former Senator Lamar Alexander's office in Tennessee, and there were all of these heads from when he went hunting. So there was like a big bear head and a moose head. And it's a great conversation starter, right? You go to the Georgia offices, they've got a ton of Coca-Cola products. And so if you are just like stuck in the moment and you're like, what do I say? What do I say? Look around the walls and be like, oh, this is actually really cool. Or, oh, I didn't know this product was made in the district. Again, especially at the national level, some of these staff don't know how people are coming in. And so unfortunately, they're on the defense. And some staff are still dealing with trauma from January 6th. And so any ways in which you can come and just really make the whole situation feel human. Maybe you don't immediately start off by like getting down to business, but you just want to relate to them. Those are really good ways to, I think, make it easier for both. And then also allows you to get a sense as to like, oh, this is what this member is. Like he's got all of these things. So it's just finding connection points between you two as human beings, which then grease the wheels for you to eventually have those conversations about policies, or big P politics that you don't agree with, but at least folks know like, oh, we're both human beings because we both appreciate the Coca-Cola fridge, or maybe if you like moose hunting, then you could have gone into Lamar Alexander's office and be like, oh, I hunted the biggest moose. So that's just another thing to look out for. And again, it also just makes it easier.
That's a great tip. And Jamie put, find out if their graduate alumni are shared interest to bridge the gap. Kind of what you were saying, exactly what you were saying. And what's really nice, if you go to the websites for, both state and at a federal level, you can read their bios. And that is, I always try to read a bio before I go in the office so that I can be like, oh, you have 3 boys? So do I. Let's talk about raising 3 boys, and make that connection, because then they're going to remember you. And it's human. We're humanizing it because, again, they don't really, people, we are humans. We were created to be in relationships. So we want to build that relationship. Connect with family, kids, schools. Telling you, bring your kids to the Capitol. That's like, not that I want to use my kids, but legislators love kids. So definitely do that. So we are down to 2 minutes. Any other thoughts?
I've got a couple of housekeeping items too, Robyn, before.
Oh, that's right. Are they on this slideshow?
They are. If you want to start pulling that up, first and foremost, we do have approval for credit hours for this particular workshop. So if you are wanting to get credit hours through the MOPD system, please drop your full name and your MOPD number in the chat for me, and I will capture those here in just a little bit. But the other thing, just I can't get away from it because I love it so much, is that I really hope that I get to see all of your smiling faces at Child Advocacy Day. This has been a huge project this year. I've gotten to take on a lot of new stuff from the team and learn a lot about the back end and all the hard work that does go into Child Advocacy Day becoming successful. With that being the case, if you've not registered, you can scan that QR code and we'll be able to get you registered for Child Advocacy Day, stay in the know with the stuff that's going on with it. Even after, we are going to be doing a lot more this year after Child Advocacy Day ends to keep everybody updated and kind of know what's happening for 2026. And then if you want to go ahead and change the slide, Robyn, we've got a couple more workshops coming up. We have 5 more. So today we completed Advocacy 101. You learned a lot of new information or got some good refreshers. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about what's going on in the state for child welfare. Casey is going to join us on Thursday doing Crafting Your Story. It's a storytelling piece for those that were wanting a little bit more information. We've also got children's issues in the budgets next week, as well as looking at the early childhood landscape and children's health and mental health. So be on the lookout for those. They're up on our Facebook pages. They are on our newsletters that are coming out and our emails that are coming out. Or you can always reach out to one of us directly, and we'll be more than happy to do that. We've got some regional prep rallies happening all over the state. There's one tonight in Kansas City. There was a couple last week, one in Rolla, one in Kansas City there too. We've got some more coming up in Joplin in the Springfield area. So keep an eye out for those, and love to see everybody there. And then just kind of a quick coverage of what we're going to be doing at the Capitol next week. We've got a rally that starts a little after 9 o'clock. We've got some great speakers. You're going to be able to do legislative visits. We have tables. A lot of them are our sponsors or someone else that might be doing some information there. Lots of great things to learn about. There's going to be some really cool photo ops, including a bald eagle and some other animals. So I'm very excited about that. Going to have lunch at the Mill Bottom. We've also got an afternoon chat that afternoon once kind of lunch is wrapped up with Desi, the OOC, and one of our other special guests. And afterwards, you're going to get to leave with a feeling that you did something to help shape Missouri's future. Everything is amazing and everything is great, but at the end of the day, that's what we want. So I am excited about Child Advocacy Day, and I hope that each of you gets to join us over in the Capitol in about 2 weeks. It's kind of crazy how close we are. And then Robyn, if you want to jump to that last slide, I just thought this was, Robyn actually did this. She did a great quote for us on the very last one. It says, each one of us can make a difference. Together we can make change. And I absolutely love that. I have loved doing advocacy work for the last couple of years. I love that I get to get paid for it now. But I would continue to do it out of the goodness of my heart because I think it's important, especially for the children and families here in Missouri. So if anybody has questions, feel free to hang out. You do not have to hang out with us after this, but I'll stay on for a few minutes for anybody that'd like to chat just a few little bit. But that is the end of today's workshop and presentation. Looking forward to seeing everybody at Child Advocacy Day and on the rest of our workshops over the next 2 weeks.